My name's McManus, and I'm going to talk about progressive enhancement strategies. I started out as a front-end developer. I was working on lots of single-page web applications and thought that don't work when you turn on JavaScript. And it kind of felt a bit frustrating that we couldn't do it slightly better. And one of the things that I liked about Node was that it gave us the ability to run JavaScript on the server. We could make applications in such a way that it does run server-side and client-side. But it still gives that really nice experience that people want, and they demand for the native experience or the single-page web experience. So just to cover a little bit about what progressive enhancement is. It's about assuming the least about the person consuming what you're trying to send to them. So you get a request and they're asking for HTML. We know that they understand HTML. We send them HTML that works completely on its own. We make no reliance on the CSS, even down to things like images. We put alt tags there. We assume that if it's a search engine crawling the site, we want to be able to show the metadata about the image. So we put the alt text there and the screen reads will do the same thing. With CSS as well, when we use CSS3, we also have a CSS fallback to make sure that when a browser comes along that doesn't understand CSS3 rules, it can still fall back to the CSS rule. It's all about layering things up. And then on the top layer is the JavaScript, the interaction, the validation, the page transitions, and making that really nice experience on top of it. So I think Twitter provided a good example of why it's important to get this right. So at one point, Twitter redesigned their website. And they made it so the first request gives you some extra HTML, and then it gives you some JavaScript, about 2 meg of JavaScript it turns out to be. And after you downloaded those 2 meg of JavaScript, it would then show you the 140 characters you were there for in the first place. You were stopping the users seeing the content they were going there for in the first place, just to put on top of them an experience that they probably didn't want. They just wanted to read those 140 characters. And Twitter very quickly moved away from this kind of architecture because they realized that when you're building things in an environment where you don't know how good the internet connection is and you don't know about the device, it's better that you just give them the information that they're actually asked for in that first step, and then you layer the interactions on top of that. So, one argument I hear very often is that everyone in this room, even Google's got JavaScript turned on now, right? So, if our content's getting indexed by the search engines and everyone can view it, why does it matter if it doesn't work without JavaScript turned on? So, there's a few bits I want to point out on that. So, if you read the blog post or whatever it was where Google announced that they did work with JavaScript turned on, they also say your site should still work without JavaScript. So they're very clear that you still need to build websites that work without JavaScript turned on. They make another product which I discovered completely accidentally called Google Mobilizer. Google Mobilizer's primary purpose in life is to remove JavaScript and CSS file from web pages to optimize it for viewing on mobile devices. So although they are saying they can read the content, they're also saying it's better on mobile devices without having these extra bits. And the other thing that Google really cares about load times. So one thing that's always affected PageRank is how quickly it takes for your content to render to the user, or to load straight away. Now that Google is able to load the JavaScript, it can also see that it's taking a long time on multiple HTTP requests in order to show that content to the user. And what we saw happen on Tuesday is Google changed their algorithm so it's actually showing custom results based on whether you're on a desktop or a mobile experience. So if it thinks the site won't load very well on a mobile device, it won't show you that in the search results on a mobile device. So Google is showing even more that it actually really cares about the experience you provide to your user. Another good example is when we try and share stuff. So to me, what's really powerful about the web is our ability to share things. We can get a link, I can email it to you, I can bookmark it, I can store it in my favourites. There's various different things I can do with it. I can share it on these social sites. And I think a good example of where these single-page web applications fall a bit short is when you try and share them on things like Slack and on Facebook. So if you share something in Slack or Facebook, it just makes a HTTP request to the URL you're sharing. In Facebook's case, it then looks at the metadata, looks at open graph tags and such like, and tries to provide a nice inline summary in the newsfeed about what that page was saying. If you require JavaScript to render relevant content at that URL, they won't be able to provide relevant content in the newsfeed. So, before I start getting into Node too much, one of the last big applications I worked on was the Volkswagen car configurator. And this was a problem we had. We had a single-page web application on the front end, and we had a Java backend. People would go and configure their car, and then they'd come to share it. They want to show their friends the car that they've made. They'd go into Facebook, and it wouldn't show them a preview. And it's fine. There's ways to solve this, right? We So you end up in Java, so you've already written it in a single page of application, but it's fine, we'll do it again in Java. So we write some routing, we get our templating in there, and we make it so we can push data into those templates. And it's fine, that works. But we've just duplicated what we had in the client side, right? And we don't like to do that software developers. We like to do things once, and we like to reuse that. So yeah, why are you trying to hack around something that works really well? You're doing all these workarounds for something that, if you got it right in the first place, it would actually just work. Okay. So in terms of how you're actually going to do this, I always think you need to be starting on the server side. I've worked on projects that start on the client side and try and move it to the server. It's a lot easier if you do it the other way around. Start on the server and move things onto the client. And to me, the things that are really important to have available on the server or know about on the server are these three things. So your routing, your templating, and your model. So at URLs, you need to provide some markup, and you need to put data into that markup. So that's the basic thing that needs server-side. Who in the room knows about PJAX? Okay, I should explain PJAX. So PJAX is actually quite an old technology. It was something that originally came up with by GitHub. And the idea is that when a user first loads a page, they get the full page. They get the layout and everything around it. But then on subsequent page loads, they don't need that layout. It's already loaded. We don't need to refresh that part of the page. So with JavaScript, when a link gets hit, and how it hits that doesn't actually matter too much, but when the link comes in, we make a request to the server, but we add the header PJAX is true. On the server side, it sees that, and it says, okay, well, we don't need this layout because it's already got that, and it just sends the bit of the data that's changed back to the browser. And in JavaScript, we can take that and we can use DOM manipulation to just update the part of the page which has changed. So we're trying to update the page on a more granular level. Instead of just flashing the screen and changing everything, we're just changing the part of the screen which is updated to give a nicer experience to the user. So when designing systems like this, I like to think restfully. What are the things which make up your system, and how can you represent those? So think in terms of resources and representations. So in the example I'm going to show in a minute, it talks about trains. So we've got stations as a resource, and we can see different representations of them. So a simple version is the PJAX, where you can request it with the full version, or you can get the smaller content area. And another thing that's really simple to do, and if you get it into your architecture at an early level, it's really useful, is just a simple statement that will allow people to request the JSON. So at the point when you're about to render a template, you usually just send out the template. But if you check there to see if they're requesting JSON, if they're requesting JSON, just give them the data that's going to go into that template. If not, give them the template, the rendered data, then you can reuse that a lot more easily. You effectively give yourself an API for free that you can use on your client side as well. So this illustrates how, this is something by Google, it illustrates how over time things have become more complicated. We've added more browsers, we've added more devices, we've added more features. And if we're saying we're going to progressively enhance and slowly build on every single bit of that technology, that's a lot of complexity, and I wouldn't suggest anyone actually tries to do that level. You can't do each one of those step by step, because there's just too much there, and this is a problem that's going to get bigger. We're introducing more, there's watches coming out, there's new devices that are all going to have their own subtleties. So one way to deal with that is mustard tests. BBC have got a blog post, Cutting the Mustard, which describes it quite well. And the idea is that you make a few assumptions and you say that this is an advanced browser, this can get the fully featured and full functionality, or this is a basic version, and this is just going to get HTML and CSS layered on top of it. So it's worth reading the BBC blog post. For me, so their distinction is HTML4 and HTML5, and they have 4 or 5 different rules of working out which it falls into. But I actually like to think of it like this. So this is my mustard test, if history got push state. If the user has push state, you are going to be able to provide them a nice experience. You are going to be able to provide nice transitions. If they don't, then you're going to spend most of your time hacking around things, trying to do these horrible workarounds which don't work very well. So for me, if they've got history.push state, they get the full experience, and that's basically IE10 and above, whereas below they just get the basic experience. And with the BBC version, they're talking about IE8 will get the full experience. So it's a subtle differences there, but just in terms of not generating too much work for yourself, this makes your life easier in my experience. So I said to start on the server side, but we want to reduce work and ensure we don't duplicate things. So we need to share things. We want to share our routes, we want to share our templates, and possibly we want to share our data. That's one of the things I've got. In terms of how you can share those things, Browserify, which has already been mentioned, is a really nice tool. You actually take common JS modules and put them on your client side and use them in your code. Duo.js does something similar. I put on GitHub that I was actually going to talk about Duo, so I've mainly put it aside for that reason. I'm not using Duo in any of the demos that I'm going to show in a minute, but Duo does some really nice things. It lets you store your components. So it lets you store your components in things like GitHub and remotely and have complete separation between your components and have a build script that goes and pulls your components from these different places. But Browserify and Duo, they will help you share your code and particularly your templates. So with a Browserify transform, you can just require your J files or whatever templating language you're using in your client-side code, and it's actually a very nice way of doing it. So one thing that I did get from using Duo was the idea of this component structure. You've got a folder, it's got components in it. Each of those, so each folder is a component, and then that has HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In this case, we're using preprocessors, so it's a JTemplate, SCSS, and well, just JavaScript. But these things are completely standalone. You can implement them however you want. The JavaScript in them is just however you want to put it together. It works quite well with things like Backbone and such like, but you can use whatever architecture you want actually inside of those. But this is just about keeping things loosely separated at the moment. So you've got these loosely separated things, but they don't know very much about each other, and they're not going to provide that full experience. So we need something that ties them together. So this is where a pages layer comes on top. Pages are effectively an orchestration layer. They pull together all the different components and build that tied together experience. So in this case, it's basically the same thing again. We've got a pages folder, which has got a folder for each page. This is our starting point for Browserify, and things like the SCSS compiler will point it at home, SCSS, and we'll get a JavaScript and SCSS file for each page. We can also use things like factor bundle, which is something that works with Browserify, where you can pass it all of those JavaScript files. It will work out where there's things that are shared, put that off into a shared bundle, so that you've got things shared across all of the pages, and then you're one specific to each page, which obviously optimizes things for load times and such like. Okay, so hopefully you're following along, and we've got a load of components that don't know much about each other, and then we've got some pages which are tying together all those components. At this stage, we've got a CSS file for each page, a JavaScript file for each page, and a shared CSS file and JavaScript file. I mentioned that what we want to do is be sharing the routes. And I've worked on various different projects where I've tried to share route between client and server, and it's never quite felt 100% right, and I've never been able to turn it into something that's very reusable. The thing that I usually use when I'm trying to do this is page.js. Anyone familiar with page.js? Okay, good stuff. So page.js is a client-side router that uses the exact same routing syntax that Express uses. So when you're writing your routes in Express, you can use exactly the same syntax client-side. And then it can do the history.push state things for you in the browser. So generally what I try to do is use this in conjunction with Express to give that idea of sharing a route, but it's never quite been reusable. So I've made something that has been an attempt to make it reusable. It's not perfect, it doesn't support things like middleware, but it does kind of work. So Pagify is a Browserify transform. In your code that's going through Browserify, you just simply say require Pagify. That looks in your project for a Pagify config file. Now the actual source of that config file could be configurable or moved to other places, but for purposes at the moment, it's just in the root project. Maybe I should show you an example at this stage.
Nice. Does it have an E in it?
Sorry?
Sorry, does it have an E in it?
Oh shit, yeah it does, sorry. It's fine, it's fine. Okay, so this is all public. This is a tube, the website I was talking about to do tubes. It's at next-tube.london. If you want to have a look at it, it's more experimental than anything else. But as you can see here, we have a Pagify config file that I mentioned. And what we have here is a mappings object. And what that's going to do is, as I say, that would be, I'll show you what that actually generates in the client side in a minute. But what we're saying is when you hit this route, here's some page client-side code for it, here's some client-side code for this one, and then we've got the route. So they're two separate things. There is the possibility to join the page and the root and make them the same thing. So this is obviously the server-side handling, and this is the majority of the client-side handling, although it does contain a template which will be used by the server-side bit. So that's just the mappings object, and we've got something that will go through that and generate the router from it. At the top here, we've just got a function which specifies when you actually hit a page what you want to do. So this doesn't make any assumptions about how you're writing your application. You can put whatever stuff in here you want to destroy the previous page and give you those nice interactions between the different pages. And it's also completely customizable. You don't have to use SCSS. You can use whatever extension you want. So let's see if I can find over. Actually, let's read the website first of all. So this is just a little thing I've been playing with for a little while. Someone else wrote something that made the London Underground CSS as a CSS map. Done it all in CSS basically. This is just me playing with it with CSS and I haven't done all the work here. This is all someone else's work really. All I've done is the animations between the different stations and such like. So the idea is we can come along here, we can choose a station, it gives us a nice zoom interaction, and then we can see the station, when the trains are coming. But if I turn off JavaScript, it's not exactly the same at this stage. There's a few bugs, but you get exactly the same thing rendered to you, but you just don't get that interaction layer on top. You get the same functional experience, but you might have to press a search button instead of it just automatically searching for you. Okay, well, let's show you the So another one that I've been working on, this is a lot less stable and I wouldn't recommend using this. It's an interesting thing to look at, but I wouldn't recommend using it. So what I'm actually going to do while I'm talking about it, I'm going to have it running in the background, just so you can see how unstable it is mainly. Okay, so you remember what I was saying about the granularity of the data, and we want to give the user the affordance that something's changed at a granular level. We don't just want to refresh this whole area here. If this train disappears, we want that to shrink up, these ones to move up slowly, and give suggestions to the user what's changed. And one thing that I realised when we're actually doing this is trains do crazy things, like trains overtake each other. Like you'll get a train that skips and comes up here and all different things like that. And you don't even notice that normally in data because it just flashes and updates. But the idea of change path is, on the server side, we're polling the API constantly. So the server always knows, the server's always the source of truth. When we render to the browser, we know that we've sent them all the data. And all we do over WebSockets is we send them basically a JSON diff of what's changed since we rendered the page. And the idea is to always keep this in sync from that. So we're minimizing the amount of data being sent over HTTP because we give them all the data they need up front, and then we only send them the things that change. As I say, this isn't very stable at the moment. This can do some crazy things and get completely out of sync at the moment. It needs the idea of versioning so that it actually knows which version it's on, so that if it misses a version due to it drops connectivity, it can do the full refresh and update all the data in there. So hopefully that makes sense so far. Okay. So everything you've seen so far is just me, well, PJAX had nothing to do with me, just me playing around. And it struck me for a while that I've always worked with people that have done quite a lot of progressive enhancement and thought about things in terms of progressive enhancement. And I spent the last couple of years going to conferences, quite a lot of them, and it always struck me that they didn't really tell me what I wanted to hear about. They were telling me about this new shiny framework that would probably make my application slower and less performant. When actually, what I wanted to know about was how I could make my applications more robust and faster. And I got talking to people, and it seemed like there was a lot of people in a lot of different communities doing a lot of things around progressive enhancement, and that just wasn't being talked about in conferences. And as I say, it was all about the shiny and the latest thing. And what we're wondering is, could we do a conference about progressive enhancement? We're investigating it. We're trying to work out if we can actually put together a thing where we're getting people together to talk about progressive enhancement and actually, as a community, grow by educating each other and helping each other. I think Node as a community is very much well positioned to do a lot of these things because we can do the JavaScript client side and server side. So if there's, at the moment, all we've got is a website and a Twitter account. You can sign up for updates. If you think you know someone that would be good to speak, If you'd be interested in attending, anything like that, please come and talk to me. We'd love to hear what you think about it. If you think it's a good idea or think it's a terrible idea. And I think that's all I've got time for. Thank you very much. Any questions? Questions?
I just have to get the channel. What were you thinking?
Oh, but yeah, any feedback you've got, put it into the Git channel and we'd gladly receive it. Your question?
I just wondered, do you think the page concept, you talked about components concept and then page concept. Do you think the page concept is necessary? Because page consists of components.
Yeah.
They can act on their own styling.
So
be self-sufficient?
pages are actually the same as components, they're just in a different folder to separate them out. I mean, it depends how you want to architecture your application. So the way that I've done it is that all of my components don't know anything about each other.
Yeah.
So the pages are different because they're the orchestration layer. They know about all the components and they can tie them together.
Yeah, my question is, do they need to know that? So you have a template with components, and that's about it. Does the page need to have JavaScript and CSS? That's the question.
Sorry, you've lost me slightly there.
So what I'm asking is, you need a template to render your components on the page.
Yes.
But then I wonder whether you need JavaScript and CSS
No, so I mean,
for the page level, because each component has its own JavaScript, its own CSS.
yes, but they don't know about each other. So it's the components are completely independent, and it's the component markup is just going to be the thing for that component. And if you want to bring the components together, you will need a page, I think. And I'd be interested to talk to you afterwards if you think you can do without them.
Yeah, we did that.
How would those components communicate with each other? So they're independently, but they still need some level of
Or event
communication.
bus or floods.
Sorry?
It can be event bus, it can be floods.
Yeah, but there's some form of framework that's going to need to be in the
So
background.
I mean, I am working on an event bus. All the components talk to it. So the way that the change path thing works, the server talks to the page. The station page listens for those WebSocket connections and gets those, and then that just sends it off to an internal bus, which the components are listening on. But the components aren't listening to the WebSocket, so they wouldn't get that notification through. But none of this is, you don't have to write it in that way. That's just the way they've done it.
I'll be interested in that.
So, but yeah, it's all aligned when I look. Anyone else?
I had that slide about Twitter, and I think it's unfair to single-page apps because actually single-page app, for the second time you would load it, it would only load the tweet, whereas typical application would download the whole, HTML with the tweet. So, yeah, it's all right for the first case, but for the second case you're caching all the assets. So.
Yeah, the first page load's the one that makes a big difference. That's when you might
for some kind of applications where users are coming back, single-page applications usually.
It's the whole thing about cacheability. But yeah, it's a fair point. But generally, I like to try and make sure that each page has got their own bits, and they can be cached per page, and then you've got shared things which gets cached across the pages. Yeah. But again, it depends. It's all about what level you want to go to with it.
Yeah.
You've also got to consider passing time on a mobile device, which is often, if you're on Wi-Fi, say, the time it takes to parse the JavaScript is probably longer than all the networking activity combined on a big app.
Yeah, I haven't been using full mobile phone. So I might be skewed.
And that's another good point. Make sure you test your stuff on mobiles, because there's a lot of studies coming out now where people build using these frameworks and actually put it on mobiles, and it's really not great performance. So whatever framework you're using, actually get a real mobile device out and try it on it to see what the experience is like for the user, and do it where the network isn't that good as well, because that's where you should be testing yourself out.
Get a really crap mobile to test.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, cool.
Thank you very much.
Hold on, sir.
Oh, there's another question. Oh.
Yeah, go on.
Just on the subject of testing, what are you recommending to use with your development flow that you just described?
So that there is mainly something that I've used for a personal project, but I've taken from various projects. I mean, the fact that you've got a basic and enhanced version, that obviously makes it much less that you've got to test. Are you talking in terms of automated testing, or?
Yeah, so just to check, I mean, would you use like source labs to do the front end, or
yeah, you still want to be able to flow through your application. I mean, all the same testing you still want to do, even if you're using progressive enhancement. it's still necessary. You want to check the front end's there, the back end's there, your API's there, and it all integrates nicely.
Cool. Let's have a round of applause for Simon.